In the courtyard of the palace at Wu, 180 court ladies stood in two companies. A stranger had split them that way, put one of the king's favorite concubines at the head of each, and only then handed out spears. To the sound of drums he called, "Right turn!" and 180 women burst out laughing. His first ruling went against himself, and Sun Tzu said, "If words of command are not clear and distinct, if orders are not thoroughly understood, then the general is to blame. My fault, so we go again." He drilled them again, called, "Left turn!" and the laughter came again. Then the ruling turned. He said, "But if his orders are clear and the soldiers nevertheless disobey, then it is the fault of their officers." And the officers were the king's two favorites. A messenger hurried down the pavilion steps, and the king said, "If we are bereft of these two concubines, our meat and drink will lose their savor." Sun Tzu replied, "Having once received His Majesty's commission to be the general of his forces, there are certain commands of His Majesty which, acting in that capacity, I am unable to accept." The job outranked the man who gave it. 2 heads came off, and the other 178 turned right, turned left, knelt and stood, not venturing to utter a sound. Did the drill work? It worked. Now the part nobody says. Not one word of that scene is in the 13 chapters because it comes from Ssu-ma, a historian writing 4 centuries later in the Shih. The man on the parade ground was Sun Wu, and we call him Sun Tzu. Was it worth 2 women? He never puts a figure on that one, and at minute 15, I'll show you what he does put figures on. Today, in 20 minutes, I'm reading The Art of War. 2 women paid so that 178 would hear a drum. First, the person who wrote it down. Lionel Giles carried these 13 chapters into English at a desk in the British Museum and printed them in London in 1910, an assistant in the Department of Oriental Printed Books and Manuscripts. He dedicated it to his own brother, a captain, and called it a work 2,400 years old. Not a War Office commission, not a general's library. A museum cataloger posting sheets to a soldier in the family. He also did something translators almost never do, and it is why I trust him. Giles said, "I have been at some pains to put a sword into the hands of future opponents by scrupulously giving either text or reference for every passage translated. Check me, here is where I got it." Now the awkward part. The man he spent those years translating may never have existed. Of the Tso Chuan, the greatest contemporary record of that period, he says flatly that it makes no mention whatsoever of Sun Wu, either as a general or as a writer. The chronicle that should hold him has no line for him. So who wrote it? Nobody can tell you, and the book is oddly better for it. No biography to hide behind, only 13 chapters and a running bill. He would not put a single year on it either, only a window. Must have appeared towards the end, rather than the beginning of Ho Lu's reign. Late under a king who ruled until 496 before the Common Era, narrowed to the 9 years after 505. My reading is that the gap is not a hole in the book, but the shape of it. What got copied forward for 25 centuries was never a life, it was a method of counting. 13 chapters outlived a man nobody can prove was standing there. The first case is a bill somebody totaled and signed before a single arrow left a bow. It opens not on a battle, but on the cost of turning up. 1,000 swift chariots, as many heavy ones behind them, 100,000 men in mail, and provisions enough to carry that column 1,000 li, which a note at the foot of the page turns into roughly 360 miles. I want the rest of that sentence read exactly as printed, because the ugly little nouns in the middle are the reason I chose this book. The expenditure at home and at the front, including entertainment of guests, small items such as glue and paint, and sums spent on chariots and armor, will reach the total of 1,000 ounces of silver per day. Glue and paint, itemized on the same line as the armor. What is a war before anybody has won anything? 1,000 ounces of silver a day, and that is only the charge for showing up, because 2 verses on the men in that column arrive as bodies. Weapons dull, ardor damped, strength exhausted. And who funds it? Not the treasury, and not first. Listen to this one. Not a maxim, an observation made standing in a market. On the other hand, the proximity of an army causes prices to go up, and high prices cause the people's substance to be drained away. The people who live there fund a war they never ordered, and a verse later their homes are stripped bare. 2 commentators under that line cannot agree when the rise starts. Shih said, "Prices climb before the army has left its own ground." Cao said, "No, he means an army already across the frontier." Neither argues about whether it happens. My reading is that this is the least romantic opening in war writing, and the flatness is deliberate. He is not selling a campaign, he is invoicing one. The oldest book on war opens with a bill for paint. The second case is a cartload of enemy grain that somebody hauled into his own camp. Here is the exchange rate, and it is the strangest number in the 13 chapters. 1 cartload of the enemy's provisions is equivalent to 20 of one's own. And likewise, a single pickle of his provender is equivalent to 20 from one's own store. 1 cart taken beats 20 carts brought. Why 20? The note under the line does the freight for you. 20 cartloads get eaten hauling 1 cartload to the front. So 360 miles of oxen deliver grain that has already eaten itself. I'll read the next line exactly as printed, because I would hang it on the wall of every logistics office on earth. The skillful soldier does not raise a second levy, neither are his supply wagons loaded more than twice. Conscript once, resupply twice, and a third trip means you have already lost and have not been told yet. Now look at who pays when it runs long. Homes stripped bare, 3/10 of their incomes dissipated, while the state's bill for broken chariots, worn-out horses, breastplates and helmets, protective mantlets, draft oxen, and heavy wagons runs to 4/10 of total revenue. Hand 3/10 of this year's pay to a campaign you never voted for, then stack 4/10 on top. 3 named men argue over that figure in the margin. Ssu-ma and Shih said, "It is not 3/10, it is 7. Giles said, "This is hardly to be extracted from our text." Nobody in that argument disputes that the farmers pay, and the road shows it in flesh. There will be commotion at home and abroad, and men will drop down exhausted on the highways. Bodies on the verge before the column meets anybody. Put the enemy's cartload and your own 20 wagons side by side and hold them there. To me, that ratio is not a supply tip. It is a delay charge. And distance is not an item on that bill. Distance is the bill. Men carried earth against a city wall for 3 months, and then for 3 months more. The costing is exact, and nobody quotes it. 3 whole months to prepare mantlets, movable shelters, and implements of war. 3 months more piling mounds against the walls, heaped, says the note, to the level of the enemy's parapet. Then the general loses patience and sends them up the earth like swarming ants. And Cao said, "Picture an army of ants climbing a wall." What the text records next is flat as a receipt, with the result that 1/3 of his men are slain, while the town still remains untaken. Half a year of shovels, 1 man in 3 dead, and the wall exactly where it stood. Did the mound work? It did not. Count what is missing from that field. No relief column, no terms, no enquiry afterwards, just a heap of earth and a list. Here is the sentence. Those 6 months are a punishment for skipping. Now, the general who wins a battle makes many calculations in his temple ere the battle is fought. The thing that decided it happened weeks earlier, in a quiet room, with a brush and a tally. And that room is no figure of speech, because Chang Yu said, "A temple was set apart for a general taking the field." 14 verses on comes the line everybody can recite. Hence the saying, "If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles." Need not fear the result, he wrote, which is not a promise that you win them. My reading is that the order of that sentence is the whole verdict. The dead are not printed second because they matter least, but because the wall was the only thing that was supposed to move. 6 months of earth, a third of the men, and the wall never moved. A commander pushed his army 100 li in the time meant for 50, and 1 man in 10 arrived. The prices are set 3 times on 1 page. Push 100 li, about 36 miles, and the leaders of all 3 divisions fall into enemy hands. 50, and you lose the front division's commander. 30, and 2/3 arrive. The sentence carrying the bodies is the one people skip. The stronger men will be in front, the jaded ones will fall behind, and on this plan, only 1/10 of your army will reach its destination. Not killed, note. Strung out along 36 miles of road, still walking, too late to matter. The forced march works. Worked and right have never been the same word. Let me stop here and say something straight. The scene I opened with, the drum and the laughing and the 2 heads, may never have happened. A Sung dynasty scholar, Ye Shui Xin, went at it with a hammer and said, "The story of Holu's experiment on the women in particular is utterly preposterous and incredible, called a fabrication inside the very volume that carries it. And the translator, who printed that attack rather than bury it, would go only this far and said, the story of the women may possibly have grown out of some real incident occurring about the same time. Possibly, may have, some incident. I opened on a scene the translator would not vouch for, and there is no dressing that up. That said, the 13 chapters never needed that parade ground, and here is the line that outlived it. Hence, to fight and conquer in all your battles is not supreme excellence. Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. Winning every fight is not the top of the scale, and not needing the fight is. The march is not a warning. It is a price list. The casualty table is real, and the parade ground may be a story. A scout climbed a ridge and read the shape of the dust coming toward him. This is the paragraph I'd hand anybody who thinks the book is a fortune cookie. When there is dust rising in a high column, it is the sign of chariots advancing. When the dust is low, but spread over a wide area, it betokens the approach of infantry. Tall and thin means wheels. Low and wide means feet. It keeps going like that. Birds getting up ahead of you, an ambush, and the coldest sign is a 0. When the men do not hang their cooking pots over the campfires, showing that they will not return to their tents, you may know that they are determined to fight to the death. Nobody there is planning to eat again. What did the ridge cost him? 1 man, 1 hour, 1 horizon. The other kind of knowledge is not free, and the spy chapter prices it before it will say the word spy. 100,000 men marched a great distance, 1,000 ounces a day. Mei Yao Chen said, "Men will be lacking at the plow tail." Giles said, "1 soldier from each household, 7 feeding him. Then it loses its temper, and I owe you a seam." The translator dropped a footnote into the middle of the sentence, so I am reading it in 2 pieces. First half, to remain in ignorance of the enemy's condition simply because one grudges the outlay of 100 ounces of silver in honors and emoluments. You will not pay 100 once. Then the note, saying spies are meant but naming them would spoil it. Then the other half lands, is the height of inhumanity. Not inefficiency, cruelty. My reading is that the 2 halves are one argument. What a ridge can show you costs nothing, and what it cannot show you is the only thing worth 100 ounces. A ridge is free, and the other half of the field costs 100 ounces. A general burned his own boats at the riverbank and broke his men's cooking pots. This is the coldest passage here, and its second half never gets quoted. He burns his boats and breaks his cooking pots. Like a shepherd driving a flock of sheep, he drives his men this way and that, and none knows whither he is going. The boats are famous, the sheep are not. 3 verses back sits the quiet one. He must be able to mystify his officers and men by false reports and appearances. plant lies inside your own camp. So who are those lies for? Not the enemy. The verse in between is the outward one, shifting camp and taking roundabout roads. It is aimed at the men who will do the dying. Yu said, "The doomed spy is one of your own, sent out with a lie he believes and killed for carrying it." I'm not defending that. Here is the other side at its strongest, and it is not mine. First, from the terrain chapter, regard your soldiers as your children, and they will follow you into the deepest valleys. Look on them as your own beloved sons, and they will stand by you even unto death. He wrote that too. Then the correction. Then your soldiers must be likened to spoiled children. They are useless for any practical purpose. Love them, and still be able to move them. Li Ching said, "Soldiers afraid of you will not fear the enemy." A general who explains the plan to 100,000 men has explained it to the enemy, and silence that shortens the war costs fewer lives than candor. That is not contempt for his men. That is what he thinks love costs at that scale. He never asks what a man would have chosen if he had been told. Show me one verse where he asks that, and I withdraw it. He burned the boats his own men would have needed to go home. Put a hand back on that bill, the one holding glue and paint on the same line as the armor. Now set two of his own sentences side by side, because you are looking at one ability facing two ways. In the second chapter, he can put a figure on glue, on paint, on the entertainment of guests, and carry the total to 1,000 ounces of silver a day. In the last chapter, he can put a figure on the opposite of spending, on 100 ounces sitting undispersed in a treasury, and files that refusal under a phrase that appears nowhere else in the 13 chapters. The height of inhumanity. A bookkeeping entry promoted to a moral verdict. He could price the glue. He could price the refusal. What he never priced sits in the last clause of the coldest line you heard tonight. None knows whither he is going. The destination withheld from the men walking toward it. Watch the order. 1,000 ounces goes out through the gate every day, and nobody argues. 100 ounces stays in a drawer once, and that is the one he calls cruelty. The man who carried both sentences into English set them down in 1910, 2 chapters apart, where they have sat ever since without anybody putting them in the same caption. A ledger this honest makes the empty column louder. That was the book. Everything from here is mine, and I'll sign it. Every verdict tonight came off one axis. This book counts, and it counts honestly. Chariots, glue, paint, silver, households, months, tenths of a state's revenue, and the figures still land 2,500 years on. The men are not absent from that ledger. They are the condition of it. Every rate in here is a fraction with men in the numerator. So the counting is not my complaint. My complaint is one verse in the chapter on the 9 situations, the one instructing a general to keep his own officers in the dark with false reports. It is not the deception I object to, but the direction of it. That is my values talking, rather than a flaw I caught him in, and he would not have recognized the standard I am holding him to. You already live in the modern version, and it arrives in this order. A meeting you were kept out of. A diagnosis your father delayed telling you. The message you sent anyway. I also skipped the terrain chapters, the 6 kinds of country and the 9 kinds of ground. They are the operational core, combed through by serious military readers ever since Cao Kung wrote the first commentary 18 centuries ago. Which half of the book did you just get? The treasurers, and not the generals, and that is the price of the choice. He priced the paint and never priced what the men were not told. Sun Tzu wrote both halves and set no total at the bottom. The bill is itemized down to the paint, and the silence is free. All right, 20 minutes is nearly up. If I have to put this whole book somewhere, I'll put it on one object, a supply wagon that a skillful soldier loads twice and never a third time, because the third trip is the moment a campaign stopped being affordable and nobody said so out loud. 3 pictures to carry out with it. 180 women drilling in silence with 2 of them gone. 6 months of earth against a wall that never moved an inch. 100 ounces of silver sitting in a treasury while 1,000 a day went out through the gate. Every one of those figures is in Giles's volume, and you can check them yourself, which is more than most of the Sun Tzu quotes on the internet can survive. If I could leave you one line, I'd leave his. Thus it may be known that the leader of armies is the arbiter of the people's fate, the man on whom it depends whether the nation shall be in peace or in peril. One person's decision and everybody else's year. Subscribe, a new classic every week, faithfully in about 20 minutes. Next time a young woman walks 3 miles across wet fields to sit with a sick sister, arrives with her petticoat 6 inches deep in mud, and steps into a room that cannot agree whether she has disgraced herself or improved the view, in Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. And pick a side in the comments, no fence-sitting. Was Sun Tzu right to behead the 2 women, or was Ho Lu right to stop him? Give me the figure that convinced you, not the feeling. See you next time.